Hello folks, this is Sullla once again. Welcome to another patch review video. We're going to be looking at patch 4.10, 4.10 in this particular video, and this is a fairly sizable patch here. The two biggest changes are there is a rework to Nidalee, completely, well maybe not completely changed around, but made some pretty big changes to Nidalee. And there's a complete itemization change to the way, what it says here, offensive physical itemization. So pretty big change to the way that AD items in particular work for AD carries. So those are the two main things, but there's other smaller things. Let me go ahead and get started right away because this video will probably run for a pretty decent amount of time, just based on going through all of these. Nidalee. Let's start with Nidalee, or Nidalee, as Freak likes to call her, but we'll stick with Nidalee. Nidalee is a champion who has been heavily played in the competitive scene. She is widely hated by League of Legends players due to the way that her gameplay works. Nidalee is not really overpowered. I think that she's actually fairly well balanced overall, but her gameplay is simply not fun. And that's sort of the way that I would put that. Riot's term for using that is the word toxic. Basically, Nidalee can force the 9 other players in the game into playing her style of game, which is basically to sit back at max distance, throwing spears endlessly, and waiting until one of those spears hits. Like I said, Nidalee is not really overpowered per se, although she does have a pretty good win rate in the competitive scene. It's more just that her gameplay is horribly unfun, and it's not really fun if you're playing on Nidalee's team because you just have to sit back waiting for her to toss spears and waiting for one of them to hit. That's not very fun. And it's not really fun on the other team either because you have to dodge spears, and sooner or later someone's going to get hit by a spear. And you can't really even trade poke with Nidalee because she has that heal, and with high ability power, her heal gets pretty ridiculous. So, anyway, the goal was to tone down some of her many frustration points while giving her options other than chucking projectiles. So they have made fairly sizable tweaks to Nidalee in this patch. We'll go ahead and just go through what some of these do, and then I'll try to sum up what I think some of the effects will be. New icons, added a new particle to distinguish hunted opponents. This is a new aspect of Nidalee's passive. We'll get to that in a second. Javelin tossed visuals adjusted for better readability. That's good because oftentimes people would get hit by the spears even when it looked like they dodged them. Bushwhack ground visual indicator improved to be more noticeable. Alright, so general, all of Nidalee's Cougar forms abilities scale with ranks in R, aspect of the Cougar. That's not really new, that was the case before. Let's look at her passive. Movement, moving through brush increases Nidalee's movement speed by 10% for 2 seconds, increased to 30% towards visible enemy champions with a range of 5,500. That's a huge range, so basically anywhere even remotely close. This is similar to what Nidalee's passive was before. Moving through brush has always increased Nidalee's movement speed, but they have added this, that you get a bigger movement speed bonus moving towards visible enemy champions. So that's actually a fairly nice piece of power added to Nidalee's kit. This is the real new aspect to her passive though. Hunted. Damaging champions with Javelin Toss or Bushwhack, that's Nidalee's Q, her spear, or W, her traps. Damaging a champion with either one of them marks the target as hunted for 4 seconds. Grants Nidalee vision, 30% increased movement speed. That's the part of Prowl that you see there. And enhances her next takedown, pounce, and swipe against them. So basically the way this is supposed to work is if Nidalee hits an enemy with her Q, Javelin Toss, or with her W, her trap, then she will have this hunted debuff, and then all of her Cougar form abilities will deal more damage. That's the basic idea. You want to mark someone first with one of your abilities in human form, then switch into Cougar and get bonus damage. That's the basic idea behind how this is supposed to work. Let's look at her actual skills. Q, Javelin Toss. This is the skill that's caused so many issues. Alright, so range 1500 units, you can see minimum max damage up to maximum magic damage, depending on how far away. The spears still deal more damage if you hit someone from further away. Cost 50 up to 90 mana, cooldown 6 seconds. Here's the real change. Missile width from 60 down to 30. So they've made the spears much narrower, more skinny, is the way I'd put that. So the idea is it's harder to hit the spears. They do not have as big of a hitbox. It's easier to dodge the spears. That said, they didn't really pull much damage away from the spears. I don't know what the former numbers were. I don't have the numbers in front of me for what the numbers used to be on her spear, but it doesn't look like they pulled too much damage away. They still deal a lot of damage. At max rank, this still deals 450 plus 1.2 ability power, so that's quite a bit. I believe it's a little bit lower, but it's not much lower. So the spears still deal a ton of damage. It's just a lot harder to hit them, is the basic change there. Meanwhile, W, Bushwhack, this is Nidalee's trap ability. Again, applies the hunted debuff to champions. Here's the damage. Deals a flat damage, 20 up to 100 flat damage. And then this, 12% up to 20% of current health with 1% per 50 ability power over the duration of 4 seconds. The traps last 2 minutes. They are pretty cheap in terms of mana. They have a cooldown that goes down, scaling with more ranks in the ability. And of course, you can only affect one target per trap. This skill actually got buffed, and buffed pretty strongly. In particular, a lot of people have been looking at this and been saying, wait a minute, at max rank, at level 18, your trap is going to do 20% of current health and then another 1% per 50 ability power. If you have 500 AP, that's 30% current health over the duration of 4 seconds, plus 100 flat damage. That's a lot of damage on the traps. A lot of damage, particularly against tanky targets. It's going to deal quite a bit of damage. Now, granted, that's not factoring in magic resist. You have to remember that magic resist can mitigate some of that damage, but that is a lot. So this may be something Riot needs to look at later on, because this is pretty sizable in terms of the damage done by the traps. The one good thing is the traps do only last for 2 minutes. That's rather short in terms of the duration. So this is not like a Teemo Mushroom that lasts for 10 minutes. But the traps, traps got buffed pretty strongly here. The one thing is, this is Nidalee's 1-point skill. People generally max either her E, her heal, or her Q, her spear first. So this is her 1-point skill. So might not be as bad as we fear, but the numbers on paper do look pretty strong. E, Primal Surge. Nidalee heals a target allied champion, grants them bonus attack speed for 6 seconds. This skill is relatively unchanged. Again, I don't have the numbers for what it was previously, but this one's pretty much unchanged. A heal that also grants an attack speed bonus. It has always been a very good skill for Nidalee. Here's one of the biggest changes. Aspect of the Cougar. Aspect of the Cougar has 4 ranks. Nidalee starts the game with 1 rank in it. So, Nidalee has gotten the Jace treatment, has gotten the Elise treatment, something people have suggested for a long time. Now Nidalee gets a point in her ult at level 1. She can transform into her Cougar at level 1. This in and of itself is a major buff to Nidalee, because one of her big weaknesses was her total garbage laning phase prior to level 6. When she would get Aspect of the Cougar at level 6. So this in and of itself is a pretty big buff to Nidalee, the fact that she will have access to her Cougar at level 1 and won't have to wait until level 6. Again, no cost, and the cooldown is 3 seconds to shift back and forth between forms. Same thing here. Nidalee transforms back into a human, no cost, 3 seconds. Alright, so in Cougar form, all of Nidalee's skills do not cost any mana to use. In Cougar form, they're simply gated by cooldowns. They all have a 5-second cooldown, and that is reduced with cooldown reduction, so you can use her skills more often with some CDR. Alright, so Nidalee's next attack deals magic damage, deals additional damage to targets at lower health on her takedown or on her Q. First takedown targeting a hunted champion deals 33% increased damage. So that's the big thing there. If it's against a hunted champion, you deal bonus damage, plus 33% damage. You can see the numbers here. Again, unfortunately, I do not play Nidalee, in addition to not playing League very much recently, so I don't know if these numbers are higher or lower. I'm assuming that they are the same because there's no indicator that they are changing. So I'm assuming that this is all the same, except that a hunted champion takes bonus damage. Similar thing here, Pounce. This is Nidalee's movement skill, deals magic damage. The first Pounce directly towards a hunted champion will have up to 700 range. So that's an increased range there against hunted targets. Again, this actually adds more mobility to Nidalee's kit in the form of Pounce. What is it? Blah, blah, blah. Killing a unit reduces the cooldown. Now Pounce is in the direction of the player's cursor. So I believe that that's a little bit of a functionality tweak in terms of how this works. Blah, blah, blah. Swipe. Nidalee claws at damage. The first swipe that damages a hunted champion reduces the cooldown of Pounce to 1 second. So if you use Swipe on a hunted champion, you can immediately then Pounce 1 second later, as opposed to the 5-second cooldown. And again, I believe the rest of this is relatively the same as what it was before. So how does this add up? Well, a lot of people in the Reddit thread were saying that Nidalee was destroyed after these changes, but I don't see that at all. In fact, if anything, I think Nidalee's going to be probably a stronger laner than she was before. Now, her spears probably will be weaker. It's going to be harder to hit her. Going to be harder to hit those spears because the missile width has been cut in half. But in just about every single other way, I feel like Nidalee's actually stronger. Her traps look really strong. The fact that she can now shift into Cougar form at level 1 as opposed to level 6, that makes her laning phase much stronger. And these hunted bonuses on her Cougar form abilities feel pretty good to me. So I don't think this is really going to hurt Nidalee all that much. It's going to shift her gameplay, hopefully shift it away from the spears, but if anything, this means top lane bruiser Nidalee feels pretty good, so maybe Seraph of Team CLG will get a chance to play that in the competitive scene. But honestly, I don't think that you're going to see Nidalee disappearing very much at all. It feels like her gameplay is still quite strong, and if anything, her one weakness was her laning phase prior to level 6 was garbage, but now that she can shift into Cougar form at level 1, feels like her laning phase just got a whole lot better, so I don't feel like this really hurts Nidalee. If anything, she might be coming out of this stronger than ever, especially in the pro scene if people can hit those smaller width javelins. She's just going to be that much stronger. So we'll see, but I don't think that this really hurts her all that much. If anything, I think that she's still going to be quite strong. Okay, Skarner. Skarner was reworked back in the beginning of Season 4. It was widely argued at the time that that rework did nothing to help him, and if anything, probably made him even weaker, and I believe I said that when I did a patch video back in patch 4.2. And that's actually true, because Skarner's getting more reworks yet again. His champion has been in a bad place. Part of the reason why Skarner is in such a bad place is Riot sometimes will create champions that are very similar to other champions. The key champion that killed Skarner was the release of Vi. Vi basically did the exact same thing as Skarner, except Vi did it better, so there was no reason to play Skarner when you could simply play Vi, and that's still kind of the same case here. Anyway, let's look at what they've done for Skarner. So they've updated his textures, and they've added new particles for his W. They've also added new icons for all his abilities. So the previous icons didn't last very long. They've been updated yet again. Excuse me. So what have they added to Skarner's passive? Well, basically Skarner's damaging spells apply a Crystal Venom debuff. If Skarner lands a basic attack on a target with 3 stacks of Crystal Venom, he'll deal extra magic damage and stun for up to 1 second. After being stunned, targets cannot be debuffed for another 6 seconds. Now, this sounds well and good, but it's actually fairly difficult to apply this new passive to get that stun. Again, how does this proc? Well, he needs to land a basic attack on a target with 3 stacks of Crystal Venom. So what skills actually apply this? Well, his Q, obviously, his bread and butter skill. W cannot apply this. W does not damage enemies. Only the Q and the E can actually apply this. So the way that this is supposed to work, as I understand it, is Skarner runs in after his target, he tosses E on them, his fracture, that is his ability that slows enemies. Then he goes in and Qs them and starts applying damage with Q. If he manages to hit his E and hits 2 Qs, then he can land an auto attack to proc a stun. That's pretty awkward to do. You need to land 3 skills and then land an auto attack after that. Compared to other junglers who can just dash in and stun or slow or get off some other form of crowd control, this is pretty difficult to proc. So, is this nice to have on the kit? Yes, obviously. It's better than not having a stun, but it's pretty difficult to get this stun off. So, I don't see this as being all that useful, to be perfectly honest. The Q, basic attacks reduce Crystal Slash's cooldown by 0.5 seconds. I thought that this was already in the kit, but apparently, perhaps it wasn't. Crystal Energy also grants movement speed up to 3 stacks, so Skarner's Q now grants both movement speed and attack speed. So, again, this is the skill you have to max first. They actually compensated this, though, by lowering the damage. They lowered the base physical damage and the scaling. They lowered the base magic damage and lowered the scaling as well. So there's more utility here, but less damage. And in fact, the numbers feel fairly low on this ability. They lowered the cooldown on his W, so that's nice for Skarner. Now his W is up much more often, up to every 11 seconds at max rank, but that's still fairly on the high end for cooldowns. And his Fracture, they have what? They have lowered the cooldown, 12 seconds at all ranks, but they cut the damage. They actually cut the damage enormously. They cut the magic damage in half. It's literally half of what it was before, and the AP ratio is also just about in half. So Skarner has more utility. He's got the stun, he's got the movement speed stacking up on his Q, so that's nice, but his damage has been cut enormously. I mean, they really nerfed his damage, and with Skarner being so weak before, it just feels difficult to see Skarner really getting much play. His numbers are very low. He just doesn't deal that much damage, and I don't feel like he gives enough utility to make up for that. You can see here the ultimate Impale consumes all stacks of Crystal Venom, deals magic damage per stack consumed, and they lowered the cooldown. That's nice, but I still feel like Skarner's not in a very good place. I feel like there are other junglers that are much better. Why would you want to play Skarner over Elise? I mean, Elise's Cocoon is so much better than any of the ganking tools that Skarner has, and Elise is just much more versatile as a champion. So why would you play Skarner over like Elise or any of the other junglers we see in the competitive scene, over Lee Sin with his tremendous mobility, over, I don't know, even some of the other junglers we've been seeing. Probably not going to see Jungle Kha'Zix as much anymore, but you know, you might be seeing Jungle Rengar a lot more. Was already sort of a popular pick. So anyway, just feels like there's other junglers that are better than Skarner, so I don't see him getting much play. Anyway, some of the more minor stuff, those are some of the biggest reworks. Galio got a minor tweak, got magic resist per level, so yay, that's not really going to get people to start playing Galio, but it's a nice little tweak for anyone who plays Galio. Gets MR per level, and of course gets ability power for that through his passive. Gragas, they've changed it so Gragas doesn't lose the damage reduction on his W on his Drunken Rage if he's interrupted during the drink. So, I guess that's kind of nice. Karthus, bug fixes, fixed a bug where Lay Waste appeared to give more vision than it actually did. Wall of Pain's voiceover will no longer be interrupted by movement commands. Added the screech of a bird of prey, an eagle by the way, for those who don't know. Add a screech of an eagle to Statue of Karthus' dance, and Requiem's visual effects are more noticeable. Basically, they've tried to make his ultimate look a little bit better. It was kind of underwhelming in the last patch, but all this is just visual stuff. It's just graphical effects. No gameplay effect there. LeBlanc is a champion that's had a lot of problems for Riot. LeBlanc has been very, very powerful in the competitive scene due to the way that her skills combo together. The problem, though, is LeBlanc's win rate in solo queue has always been very low because you kind of have to be an expert mechanical player in order to use LeBlanc. So Riot's been hesitant to nerf her because if they, you know, in the competitive scene, she's almost constantly permabanned or picked, but for everyone else, she's not really that strong at all. She's just kind of average. So they've been hesitant to nerf LeBlanc in the competitive scene due to her effect on solo queue, where she's not really that strong. Anyway, they finally have come up with something that they think will be good. They have removed the silence from LeBlanc's Q. No longer silence his target. This is a big nerf to LeBlanc. It's a smart way to do it, though, because it doesn't take away her mobility, and it doesn't take away any of her damage. It just means that she doesn't silence targets when she combos her Q, when she combos her Sigil of Silence, or now it's Sigil of Malice instead. Like I said, it's a smart way to do that. One of the problems with LeBlanc, why she was so frustrating, is if she executed her trade correctly, it was very difficult for someone to counter trade because they would be silenced in the process. So it doesn't take away from her damage or her mobility, but hopefully it makes her less frustrating to play against because people have a chance to counter trade against her. I actually like this change a lot, and we'll see. I think she'll still get picked pretty frequently in the competitive scene, but it will be easier for people to have some counterplay. It's kind of the way of looking at it. Lucian is getting a fairly minor nerf. They nerfed the scaling, the bonus AD ratio on his Ardent Blaze. That's his W, where he shoots out. Lucians typically use this just to proc their passive and for a little bit of wave clear. This is typically the skill that is maxed last on Lucians. So this is a very modest nerf. It's not going to be enough to get people to stop playing Lucian. He probably needs more nerfs than this. That said, again, I like the decision here. Rather than Riot doing what they've done in the past, which is to nerf 4, 5, or 6 things at once, nerf one thing, see what effect it has, then if it's not enough, you can make more changes later. Lucian has been really in almost every single game in the competitive scene in Season 4. He does everything so well, is sort of the problem there. But I'll talk more about this when we get to the AD itemization section. Pantheon, they fixed a bug where Pantheon could use summoner spells before landing. You could use Flash to reposition before landing. Is that really a bug fix or a nerf? It feels more like a straight up nerf than a bug fix, but anyway, one or the other. Sivir, the Sivir was nerfed in the past by increasing the mana cost on some of her spells. They're reverting some of those nerfs. They increased her base mana by a whole 4 mana, 246 to 250, whoop-de-doo. They also gave her back more mana per level and increased her mana regen per level, so giving her back a little bit of mana. Relatively minor, but that might be enough to see Sivir played more. Sivir is honestly not that great in solo queue, but she is very powerful in the competitive scene, where her ultimate can be used to engage and disengage with great ability. Thresh, they apparently used the incorrect icon on his Flay, now displays the correct buff icon, so that's nice. Tristana getting more buffs. I'm a little surprised that they're doing this, actually. I think that Trist is actually in a fairly good position. The reason why you're not seeing Trist played is not because her kit is necessarily weak, it's because she didn't fit all that well in the way that the metagame was set up for the competitive scene. But I thought that Trist didn't really need these buffs. In any case, though, she's getting them. Rocket Jump cheaper, 60 mana at all ranks instead of 80 mana at all ranks. And her Buster Shot now, the range of that now scales with level in the same way that her auto attacks scale with level. and her explosive shot, her E, now also scales with level as well. Again, I think that Trist is pretty good. The reason why you're not seeing Trist played is because there were other hyper-scaling champions that were just in a better place. In particular, Twitch. Twitch was overbuffed when he got his rework. Twitch was actually made noticeably too strong. And if Twitch is going to have a better laning phase than Tristana and an equally strong late game, then there's not really any reason to play Tristana over Twitch. You know, Twitch just did everything pretty much better than Tristana did. But I think that Trist is actually quite strong, and I think we might start to see her, especially after these AD itemization changes go through. She, actually, her laning phase is not that bad anymore. That was always the weakness. Was her laning phase was weak, and her mid game was pretty terrible. Well, her mid game is still going to be kind of weak, but her late game is amazing, and her laning phase is not that bad. She has just been steadily getting, they made it so her Q didn't have a mana cost at all. They made it so her E scaled with her passive, so you'd get extra range on it. Now they've cut the mana cost on her W, and her ultimate gets extra range. Honestly, she's starting to get into the point where these minor buffs add up over time and you get a champion that's really strong. So we might see some Trist. Tryndamere, new icons, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. They didn't even show what the graphical stuff looks like. Cleaning up some of the older artwork. Anyway, Twitch was reworked about 2 or 3 patches ago, and that rework overbuffed Twitch. It was very obvious that he was overbuffed, so they're nerfing Twitch's stuff. Nerfed his base damage, not by a lot, but 3 AD, 52 down to 49. Nerfed his passive, the true damage on his passive. You can see they have reduced the amount of true damage you get. Instead of starting at 2 and scaling up to 8, it's now 1 scaling up to 6. So less damage on his passive. That might not sound like much. You're like, oh, you might say, oh, well, it's like 1 or 2 points of damage. But remember, Twitch's passive can stack up to 5 times. So you're getting those true damage stacks multiple times. And there's multiple ticks on the passive as well. You know, that true damage passive ticks, I think, 3, 4, couple times before it wears out. So it actually is noticeable when you hit this, because you're reducing on each stack and you're reducing it on each tick of the poison. They also nerfed this Q. Honestly, I think this nerf was needed. The time to stealth without taking damage is longer. Not a lot, but a little bit longer. This one in particular, the fact that Twitch could go invisible after 3 seconds, even while taking damage, that honestly felt a little too good. So they've changed it so now, if he's taking damage, it takes 6 seconds to stealth. And I think that that's a good change, honestly. It just seemed a little bit silly that he could be sitting there getting pounded with auto attacks or whatever, and he'd still go invisible in 3 seconds. Now, if you're getting hit, it takes a lot longer to go invisible. Feels like a good change to me. I still think Twitch is going to be quite strong. The Blade of the Ruined King change actually helps him quite a bit, actually. So I think Twitch is still going to be played quite a bit. He's just not going to be quite as ridiculous as he was before, and his laning phase will not be quite as strong. But that's kind of the point, right? I mean, Twitch isn't supposed to have a really good laning phase and a godlike late game. And he kind of did, which was the problem. So, needed to scale Twitch back a little bit, so he wasn't quite so ridiculous. R, Deathmark, Zed no longer teleports to a random location if he Deathmarks someone in the middle of a dash. For instance, Xin Zhao's Audacious Charge. Minor little bug fix there. Okay, so this is one of the biggest things in the patch, aside to the Nidalee changes. This is the big change. Offensive physical itemization, changing around how AD works. Let me sort of back up before we get into the actual changes and talk about what happened in Season 4. Basically in Season 4, every single AD has built Bloodthirster as their first item, pretty much without fail. Always Bloodthirster first, in pretty much every case. Now, there's the one exception is Twitch goes Blade of the Ruined King, and that's due to the fact that Twitch relies so heavily on attack speed. You would also see Vayne do that once in a while too. Vayne go Blade of the Ruined King first, but those are champions that are heavily dependent on auto attacks, attack speed, and they're still getting life steal from Blade of the Ruined King. But basically, pretty much everyone built Bloodthirster as first item. And they did that because they needed the lifesteal. Now, why did they need the lifesteal so badly? Sort of 2 or 3 things. Number 1, changes to the masteries at the beginning of Season 4, making it so you couldn't get lifesteal in the same way from masteries. Number 2, changes to the way that runes and masteries work. Runes worked and the way that some of the items worked. They made it so that the lifesteal quints weren't as good. They changed it so Durin's Blades provided life on hit as opposed to lifesteal, so you're not getting lifesteal from your quints anymore on ADs, you're not getting lifesteal from Durin's Blades. That means you need to build a lifesteal item first, and people would build Bloodthirster. Number 3, changes to supports. What supports became the best in Season 4? Well, all of these sustain supports You know, your Soraka, your Sona, your Janna, etc., your Nami to a certain extent, they all kind of fell out of favor for the most part. You didn't really see those champs being played as supports anymore. You saw Soraka as a mid laner, you saw Lulu as a mid laner, but they're not actually supports anymore. They're actually utility mages, so they're not really supports. What supports were getting played in Season 4? Thresh, Leona, Annie, Morgana, Braum, now that he's out as a champion. What do those champions have? Well, they don't have heals. They don't have shields. They're very offensively oriented. So what do you need? You need lifesteal for sustain. If you're going to be running Leona or, you're going to be running like Leona or Morgana, you need lifesteal, or else you're just going to be, the other side's going to just trade damage and you're going to get eventually forced out of lane because you don't have lifesteal. So basically all of these things combined to make it so Bloodthirster had to be the first item. And every bottom lane was decided by who can build their Bloodthirster first. In particular, this also led towards a lot of AD casters being played. Lucian being the big primary problem. Lucian, what does he have? Well, he has, he's got great, he's a great lane bully. He has great scaling. He has good AD ratios on his primary skills, on his Q and his W. Although, of course, they hit the W scaling ratio in this patch. Lucian also, like I said, he scales really well with AD scaling. I mean, Bloodthirster is just a perfect item. Lucian's in every game. Which Lucian can build Bloodthirster first, wins the lane, wins the game, etc. So, what Riot wants to do is shake that up. Make it so everyone isn't going Bloodthirster first in every single game. So what's the sort of buy-in, really the short version of this? Number one, lifesteal got more expensive. Lifesteal is more expensive to itemize. Number two, attack speed got cheaper. All the attack speed items are cheaper. Those are the two big things. Lifesteal is more expensive, attack speed is cheaper. Let's look at the actual changes in more detail. First of all, there's a new item called Essence Reaver, and basically this is supposed to help champions that need mana. You gain 2 to 8% of the damage being dealt by basic attacks as mana. This effect increases based on how much mana you're missing. 50 AD, 10% lifesteal, 10% CDR, Vampiric Scepter plus Pickaxe plus 975 gold, total cost 2650. A lot of people seem to be thinking that this is going to be a great item. People are like, oh, this is going to be great on Ezreal. It's going to bring Ezreal back. Well, maybe it will, but my feeling is that this is actually not a very good item. I agree with the people who have said this looks a little bit like a noob trap item. The problem is it's kind of expensive and the stats are not as good as the other top tier AD items. 50 attack damage, well, that's nice, 50 attack damage and 10 lifesteal, but how do you trade with someone who goes Bloodthirster as their first item? Excuse me. How do you trade with someone who goes Bloodthirster as their first item? Bloodthirster has 50 AD. Hold on. Bloodthirster is 80 AD and 15% lifesteal. Yes, it's more expensive, but Essence Reaver is just not very slot efficient. If you're up against someone who goes BT first, they're going to outtrade you, and they're going to outtrade you very badly. Even though this item's cheaper, I don't think it's enough to make up for that. Infinity Edge. Infinity Edge is, someone who goes Infinity Edge first, they're going to have 80 AD and the bonus to crit damage and crit chance. They're going to outtrade you. So, I mean, it's nice that you get mana back from basic attacks, but I just feel like this, if you build this item first, you're going to lose to someone who goes BT first or Infinity Edge first. I feel like you're just going to lose if you're trying to build this item. And keep in mind, you only get mana back on basic attacks. You don't get mana back from like an Ezreal Mystic Shot, an Ezreal Q. So I feel like this item is going to be in an awkward place. I think people are going to try it, but I don't think it's going to work that well. And it feels like an awkwardly placed item. It probably works best maybe on someone like Jace. We might see Jace using this, but I don't know. I don't think this item is that good, honestly. It's too slot inefficient, if that makes sense. That's the term I've heard, and I agree with that one. Okay, big changes to Doran's Blade. No more life on hit. Basic attacks do not restore health on hit. Instead, you get 3% lifesteal. So that is a big change. Very big change. It's going to shake up the itemization. There's a good chance we'll see a lot of ADs running lifesteal quints again because they need to get lifesteal from somewhere. Alternately, I've heard people saying you might see a lot of ADs running double Dorans into Infinity Edge. That was a common build back in the day when Doran's Blades provided lifesteal. You may see that again. I don't know. You might see 2 Doran's Blades into Infinity Edge. That is a possibility. We'll see. But less health, less attack damage, and now provides lifesteal. This does provide an incentive to stack 2 Doran's Blades. If you're Genja, 3 Doran's Blades, maybe 4. Elsewhere, notice how the lifesteal items have been nerfed. Vampiric Scepter costs the same, but it only provides 8% lifesteal, not 10%. Similar thing for Bilgewater Cutlass. Same cost, but it's only 8% lifesteal, not 12%. So Bilgewater Cutlass is nerfed very heavily. A pretty big nerf to Bilgewater Cutlass. Blade of the Ruined King, though, it might look like it's nerfed, but be careful here about what it does. So the active maximum health damage is nerfed. The active ability steals less movement speed, and the lifesteal is lower. It's only 10% lifesteal, not 50%. However, note this, passive damage. Current health damage per hit, no longer 5%, now it's 8%. You deal 8% of current health on every auto attack. That is actually a major buff. That is a big, big buff. So what this means is the active on Blade of the Ruined King is weaker, but the passive per hit is stronger. So what this means is Blade of the Ruined King is much better if you have a lot of auto-attacking capability. If you're Kog'Maw, if you're Vayne, if you're Twitch, this item got better for you. You want this item now. On the contrary, if you are a top lane bruiser who does not auto-attack much, if you are Shyvana, if you are Trundle, if you're Renekton, Blade of the Ruined King is weaker for you because you mostly use this for its active, not for its current health per damage, and not for its auto-attacking capability. You use this more for the active. So this shifts Blade of the Ruined King away from bruisers and more towards ADs, more towards AD carries. So that is the change here. How this will shake out, I'm not exactly sure, but the tanks in top lane will be less likely to buy this because they typically use this more for the active ability. Now it's shifted more towards the auto-attacking capability. Bloodthirster here, they have changed Bloodthirster, no longer grants bonus attack damage or lifesteal per unit kill. They've just removed that whole minion farming thing whatsoever, which I think is a good thing. They just removed the whole stacking thing. What happens now is Bloodthirster has a new passive. Lifesteal can overheal, grants a shield that absorbs damage and that decays when out of combat. Opinions seem to be mixed about how good this is. Some people have said they think this is really good. Other people think it's really bad. I probably lean a little bit more towards the low end. I think it's going to be hard to stack this up, to be perfectly honest. And the way that it decays when out of combat makes it a little bit hard to use. I mean, it sounds good getting this shield, but I just think it's going to be hard to get that. And in most of the other ways, Bloodthirster has been nerfed. It's more expensive, the lifesteal was increased, the AD was increased to compensate. So overall, Bloodthirster is fairly similar to the way it was before. It's a little bit more expensive, it gives a little bit more in the way of stats. And it now has this shield. Now maybe I'm totally wrong and the shield will turn out to be amazing, but I think that the shield is probably not going to be that useful just because it's going to be a little bit difficult to stack this up in team fights. Maybe in laning, the shield will be more useful. I'm not exactly sure. But I think it'll be hard to stack this up in team fights, personally. I don't know. We'll see. AD itemization, you will note that the BF sword now grants more attack damage. Every 45 up to 50, the cost was not changed, so BF sword's been buffed. Infinity Edge now grants 80 attack damage, and that's common across all 3 of the BF sword items. IE grants 80 attack damage. Bloodthirster grants 80 attack damage. Mercurial Scimitar grants 80 attack damage as well. Mercurial Scimitar quietly got buffed a lot. So look at this. Significantly more AD, 60 AD up to 80, and the total cost only went up by 100 gold, 3,700 to 3,800. The active ability now gives the movement speed bonus to range characters as well. So in other words, when you use Cleanse, the free Mercurial Cleanse, you also get a movement speed bonus, not just on melee characters, but on range characters. This item got big time buffed, Mercurial Scimitar. Significantly more attack damage, a more useful active, and the gold cost is only 100 gold higher. So expect to see many, many more Mercurial Scimitars. This got shifted way, way up in the build path of AD carries. Prior to this, AD carry build path typically looked like this. Bloodthirster first, Phantom Dancer or Static Shiv is second item, one or the other. Last Whisper third, Infinity Edge fourth. That was typically the build path. I actually think we're going to see Mercurial Scimitar slotted in as the fourth item now. So either Infinity Edge or Bloodthirster first, Static Shiv or Phantom Dancer second, Last Whisper third, Mercurial Scimitar probably fourth. It's just too good. Too good. Maybe not against a team that has no CC, but against any team with any kind of crowd control, you probably will want this as your fourth item, just because it deals so much damage and the cleanse ability is so good. Other attack speed stuff, you can see attack speed is cheaper. Dagger, more attack speed. It is more expensive, but more attack speed. Berserker Greaves, more attack speed. Costs more, but overall the attack speed is cheaper. Zeal, attack speed higher. Total cost cheaper. So again, attack speed getting cheaper. Wit's End, more attack speed. Again, it's more expensive, but not enough to... but overall, the item is actually cheaper for what it gives. Yumumu's Ghost Blade, active now, lasts 6 seconds on ranged champions as well. Before it was 4 seconds on ranged and 6 on melee, so that's a buff to Ghost Blade. Again, another attack speed item. And they've adjusted the cost of all these other items. The total price remained unchanged, but they had to adjust the recipe cost due to the cheaper component. So again, attack speed is cheaper. Now again, what champions like cheap attack speed? Champions who auto-attack to deal damage, not AD casters. You don't want someone like Lucian who does most of his damage through his skills and his passive. What you want is champions who auto-attack to deal damage. So who is that? Vayne, Tristana, Kog'Maw, even Ashe to a certain extent. Caitlyn, a good example. Caitlyn really likes these changes. Caitlyn wants a cheaper, better Infinity Edge. Caitlyn wants, Caitlyn wants cheap attack speed because she doesn't really use her abilities much. It's almost all auto-attacking. So we will likely see some shifting around in what ADs are played. If anything, a little bit less domination for Lucian, maybe a little bit more in the way of champions like Caitlyn and possibly Tristana. I think Twitch will still be played quite a bit. The other thing was they changed Warden's Mail and Randuin's Omen. They nerfed the passive. The attack speed reduction on Cold Steel has been nerfed from 15% down to 10%, and the same thing on Randuin's Omen because it builds out of Warden's Mail. This, though, is big. The passive Cold Steel no longer reduces attackers' movement speed. Reduces their attack speed still, but no longer their movement speed. For those who don't know, anytime you auto-attacked someone who had a Randuin's, the attacker's movement speed was slowed. That was a pretty big deal. So, anyway, passive on Warden's Mail and Randuin's Omen, nerfed. Overall, this does shift some power to ADs, shifted some power away from bruisers and towards ADs. So ADs will be happy with these changes. Now they also, in addition to everything else in this patch, as if this patch wasn't big enough, also has some changes to support itemization. Biggest thing is there is a new item, Ardent Sensor. Again, before I introduce this, let me back up a little bit. Again, at the beginning of Season 4, all of sort of the shielding, healing, old-fashioned supports, as we said, your Janna, Soraka, Sona, these champions were largely shifted out of the metagame. And I even talked about this. I did the patch review video right at the beginning of Season 4, and I said, there's no reason to play these supports. Why would you play Sona? Why would you play Soraka? Why would you play these as a support when, like, Leona is so much stronger and Thresh does everything so much better? Like, why would you play these champs? There's no reason to do it. They're too weak. So all of the old sustained supports just got nerfed, and there was no reason to play them. What they're doing in this patch is trying to introduce an item that will get them played again, and this item is known as Ardent Sensor. Unique passive, your heals and shields on another unit grant them 25% attack speed for 6 seconds. In addition, it has a movement speed passive, gives ability power, mana regen, cooldown reduction, total cost 2,200 gold. So this is an item that's intended to help champions like Janna and Sona and Soraka. Anytime you heal or shield someone, they get attack speed, and quite a sizable buff, 25% attack speed for 6 seconds. That's quite good. That's basically like getting a free Zeal. Zeal's 20% attack speed. So it's almost 1,000 gold worth of stats. It's I think it works out to about 800 gold worth of stats. It's roughly right around there. So that's quite nice. Anytime you're playing Janna, anytime you put your shield on someone, not only do they get the shield that blocks damage and the AD bonus, but you also get attack speed as well. Now, that said, I think people may be over-advertising this item. I'm not sure that we're going to see a huge revival of Janna and Soraka or Sona here, because these items work well on some of the current meta champions as well. Keep in mind, this works on Nami. Nami's been getting some play in the competitive scene. People really like her disengage with her tidal wave. It also works on Alistar, his heals. Remember, Alistar, area of effect heal, so grants a movement attack speed buff with Alistar's Triumphant Roar heal. Aphromoo on Team CLG will be liking this item, if nothing else. Also works with Karma. Notice that Karma can put her shield on everybody and grant them all an attack speed bonus. Also works on Lux. We may see mid lane Lux being played a little bit. We haven't seen that in a while, but with Assassins being so nerfed and this item being good, it would be pretty good on a mid lane Lux. Also works on Orianna as well, although I don't think a mid lane Orianna really wants to build this item because it doesn't really fit that well with her kit. But in any case, at least it does open up some more options. I'm not sure that this is going to be enough to get the really strong supports we've been seeing out of the current metagame. I think you'll still be seeing a lot of, Thresh. And oh, by the way, who has a shield? Guess who also has a shield? Yeah, Thresh. Thresh also has a shield, so he can also use this item. I think you'll still see a ton of Thresh, still see a lot of Morgana. I think you'll still see Braum being played a lot because Braum is still really strong. So anyway, this item's interesting, but I'm not sure it's enough to shake up the metagame. They adjusted the cost of Forbidden Idol, which builds into Ardent Censer. Mikhail's Crucible. Let's talk about Mikhail's Crucible. This item was way too cheap. Way too good and way too cheap. Only 1,600 gold for cleanse. Yeah, one reason why you didn't see Mercurial Scimitar bought very often is every support was building Mikhail's Crucible. Every support was going Sightstone plus 1 gold per 10 item, whether it was the Spell Thief's Edge or the Targon's Brace, and typically it was one of those two because we really haven't seen people using the last one, the Shirelia's replacement, the name I can't think of right now. But they go one of those two, they get the Sightstone, get their gold per 10 item, and then it was straight into Mikhail's Crucible. Mikhail's was 3rd item every single game for supports. And why not? I mean, free cleanse with a heal on it, just way too good. So Riot is changing that. They said, oops, we messed up. We made Mikhail's way too cheap. So they increased the cost by 50%, 1,600 up to 2,450. That's a massive increase in cost. And what they've done is they have, well, whoop-de-doo, they've increased the mana regen, and they've given it CDR. So, I mean, that's nice, but don't be fooled. This is a massive nerf to Mikhail's Crucible. Huge, huge, huge nerf to this item. It is much, much more expensive. So the idea is you won't be seeing Mikhail's as quite the no-brainer. You'll still see a lot. It's still a great item, but it's more logical in terms of its cost. The item was just far too cheap before, like ludicrously cheap for what it gave. So now it's a little bit less of a no-brainer to just build this as your 2nd or 3rd item in every single game. And a little minor tweak to Locket of the Iron Solari. Active Shield is now calculated using the recipient's champion level if the recipient is a higher level than the item owner. And again, so basically what this means is if you're a support and you build this, you'll get more value from the Locket Shield if someone else on the team is higher. Again, this is an attempt to shift Locket of the Iron Solari towards supports. It's intended to be a support item. It's been built more on junglers, to be honest, perhaps for this reason. So a little bit of a nice change. Ability power items, we have some minor tweaks here. The Unholy Grail is getting nerfed in this patch. They have lowered the magic resist, they have lowered the mana regen, and they've given it slightly more passive mana restoration on kill or assist. This item has been problematic. This item is simply too good. If you watch the competitive scene, everyone builds this item, first item on almost every single mid laner every game. Even LeBlancs are building this as their first item. You know, you will occasionally see LeBlanc build a Deathfire Grasp, but when even LeBlanc, an AP assassin, is building the Unholy Grail as their first item, that's when you know this item's a little bit too good. I mean, think about what it gives. Mana regen, so you never run out of mana. AP, the ability power is actually pretty high. It grants magic resist, so you can trade in lane. And it grants cooldown reduction. What more do you want? It grants every single stat a mid laner would want. So this item's been really too good for a long, long time. And it's finally being curtailed a little bit. Is this going to get people to stop buying it? Nope. Nope, it's still a really good item. Honestly, I think they should just take out the magic resist altogether. I would just scrap that completely if I were doing this item. Make it so if you, or make this the defensive item and take out the AP, or scale the AP back drastically. If you want this to be the defensive item in mid, get rid of the AP. It's too good. Anyway, they have actually buffed Morellonomicon slightly more ability power, less mana regen. They want Morellonomicon to be the offensive item in mid, if you want mana regen, and Unholy Grail to be the defensive item in mid. Or at least that's how I interpret it. But I don't think the numbers are still right. I think Unholy Grail is still too good. But we'll see where that goes. More changes. Summoner spells. About 3 or 4 patches ago, Riot enormously overbuffed teleport. They cut the teleport from, they made it so the teleport cooldown was 300 seconds, that's 5 minutes, 300 seconds is 5 minutes. They changed it so, okay, well, it's still 300 seconds, but if you teleport to a tower, it's 200 seconds. The net result of this was every single top laner took teleport in like every single game. If you've been watching the professional scene, every top laner has teleport every game. Teleport was overbuffed, way too good. 200 seconds is too cheap. So they're reverting some of that. the cooldown when teleporting the tower back up to 240. That's 4 minutes, as opposed to 200 seconds, which is about 3.5 minutes. 3 minutes and 20 seconds overall. So reverting some of that. Teleport was overbuffed, and they are nerfing it a little bit back to where it was before. Honestly, I would just revert it entirely. Teleport was overbuffed. Heal, the same thing. Heal was overbuffed. It was a really stupid patch where Riot was like, oh, we're going to simultaneously create massive buffs to heal while also nerfing Ignite. Well, gee willikers, everybody started running heal in the mid lane because Ignite was made way too weak. So they've been slowly scaling back heal ever since then, and this is yet another nerf to heal. They have reduced the speed buff duration from 2 seconds to 1. Heal should not have a speed boost duration. It makes no sense. Heal should give you back hit points. It should not give you a speed boost at the same time. That's ridiculous. I still think it's completely idiotic that that's even on this summoner. I think it's really silly. But whatever. Heal is getting nerfed again. It's been nerfed about 3 times since it was initially buffed. The initial buff was ludicrous, and they've been scaling that back to a more proper place. And Exhaust, they did a bug fix with Exhaust. Mastery Reinforced Armor, they did a tooltip clarity on this Mastery. So, to state, it reduces the total damage from critical strikes, blah, blah, blah. Summoner's Rift, Dragon, but what they've done is they've increased the base gold on Dragon and decreased the gold per level. I'm not really a big fan of this. I actually like the place that Dragon was in before, that it had a low base gold value and it would scale up over time. But Riot apparently didn't like that. Now, the reason why they're doing this, if you're curious about the logic, Riot does not like the 2v1 lanes in the competitive scene. They've been trying to force 2v2 lanes in bot over and over again. Nothing they try seems to work, but this is another attempt to do that. They're trying to make early game dragons more expensive, more valuable, so that teams will 2v2 in bottom lane. That's the goal here. They don't like these 2v1 lanes. They want to force a 2v2. The logic is, hey, if early game dragons are more expensive, teams will have to put 2 champs in the bottom lane so they don't give up those early game dragons. That's the logic here. So that's what they're trying to do. Will it work? Probably not. Nothing else they've tried has worked. We still don't see very many 2v2 lanes. Riot wants to have it that way, but nothing they try seems to work because, honestly, teams are too smart. They're not going to sit there in a bad laning matchup if they can avoid it. They're going to swap out of a bad laning matchup. This is not Season 1 or Season 2 where teams would just sit there with their Ashe Soraka lane up against like a Draven Zyra lane. I mean, I know Zyra didn't exist in Season 1, but you get the idea. They're not just going to sit there and have their lane get beaten into submission. They're going to swap lanes if their bottom lane can't handle it. So is this going to work? Probably not, but at least it forces more of a trade-off. Still, I kind of like that the early game dragons weren't that valuable, so I'm not a huge fan of this change. I kind of liked it the earlier way, the previous way. Team Builder, Captains in Team Builder will now be able to see a list of suggested players, blah, blah, blah. They're experimenting with this. Bug fixes, players who use their keyboard to purchase from the shop could no longer see the shop close. Well, obviously, you better fix any bugs involving the shop. We wouldn't want people to be unable to spend money in the shop. And fixed a bug where players would occasionally need to unlock the camera twice for the setting to apply. And here are the new skins. We have the World Cup 2014 skins are coming out in this patch, so you can check them out. They'll be available soon. And I believe they're supposed to be bringing back the World Cup skins from World Cup 2010 at some point in the near future as well. So that is a huge, huge patch. Honestly, I feel like this kind of stuff maybe should have been broken up over more than one patch because there's a lot in here. Nidalee Rework, Skarner Rework, although I'm sorry Skarner, nobody really cares about you. But the Nidalee Rework is very significant, and then major itemization changes, specifically to ADs, but also really to supports as well. I mean, that's kind of flown under the radar, but these support itemization changes are pretty big too. You're going to see some changes to support build paths. So there is a lot in here. I mean, a lot in here. This is a big patch. And people are going to have to get out there and start experimenting with it. So see what you can find. Again, my one piece of advice is I do think that the Essence Reaver is a bit of a newcomer trap. I don't think this item is really that good. I think you do better by either one of two things, either still going for BT first, still feels like a very viable build, or looking at something like 2 Dorans into Infinity Edge is also a very viable build path, I think. At least we'll see. We'll have to see what the pros and the high elo players do. But I do think that that's a much more viable build path. And this item, by the way, start building Mercurial Scimitar as your 4th AD item, because this is a really good item. In particular because your supports might not have that Crucible to save you in the way that they did before. But anyway, this video is going on for long enough. When they're big patch videos, the recordings get quite long. So anyway, once again, thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Feel free to let me know your thoughts and suggestions in the comments below. Give me your own opinion, and you might teach me a thing or two there as well. Until next time, have a good one. See you guys later. Take care.